Hello, everybody, and welcome to the much anticipated season 2 of TV Talk with our usual suspects here, Jack Schumann and Jennifer Bouani, and me, Mark Pellegrino, where we talk about popular and or critically acclaimed TV shows with a splash of an objectivist point of view, and sometimes compare those works to Atlas Shrugged, when it fits. Today, we're going to be talking about a very interesting little show on HBO Max called Station 11. So I hope all you folks who are watching us today actually sat down and watched as much of the show as you possibly could. It's 10 episodes, so it's a bit of a commitment, about 10 hours of television there, but not as big a commitment as some of our other shows in the past. And this show stars Mackenzie Davis, who's the main lead, even though it's an ensemble cast and all the characters are connected with each other. I'd say Mackenzie Davis is the main character. I think she's a very fine actress. I met her in 2012 on a little movie called Bad Turn Worse. Bad Turn Worse. And
you play a really bad guy.
I play a very bad guy in that, and I do very bad things to her and her two friends, but they deserved it. They stole money from me. So anyway, I knew she was going to be great then, and I told her so. For a number of reasons, I could tell if anybody wants to talk about it from the super chats. Himesh Patel is in it. I think he does an amazing job as Kirsten, the main character's savior, in the very beginning of the episode. Matilda Lawler plays the young Kirsten. Clark Thompson plays, David Wilmot plays Clark Thompson, who ends up taking over one of the settlements, and he is the the manager or just best friend of Bernal's Garcia of Gail Garcia Bernal's character.
Yeah, I don't know if he was his manager or agent, but
it seemed like he represented him at some point, but then later on it comes out that they were both actors that came up at the same time. And one, of course, became a movie star and the other became something else. We're not quite sure what that is. And Danielle Deadweiler, who plays Miranda Carroll, who's the first wife to our actor who connects all the pieces together, and an artist in her own right. Very well played by Danielle. Great part, interesting part, and the sense of the story is this, folks. It's a post-apocalyptic world where a virus has wiped out pretty much the entire population. It has something like a 99% kill rate. So that's a pretty significant virus. And so these folks are restarting civilization in their own particular pockets of the world, and they're all interconnected. And of course, the way in which they're interconnected comes together as the story evolves. And then at the end, of course, we get the fabric woven together and see the whole thing before our eyes. So I don't know for anybody else if they had the same experience as me, but at first I was a little not interested in the story too much. But as it evolved, as it went on, I began to see how special this TV show really is. And we'll get into my reasons for why I think it's special and extraordinary, not just because as a post-apocalyptic show, but for its focus and what it puts forward as values. I think are things that we can all say we understand and agree are very good for us. So what did you guys think before we get into the nuts and bolts of the show, what I think were the thematic elements of the show? What did you guys think of the show? Jax, you want to go first, or Jennifer?
Sure. Okay. I'm monitoring the super chats too. So Allie for $2, who picked the show for this interesting TV talk. And I remember going through and looking at shows that were kind of limited series and giving us options. And by consensus, I think we were kind of like, oh, let's just try Station 11. That one seems like that's got Mackenzie Davis, and Mackenzie is one of our comps for playing Dagny in The Strike. And so we loved her from we also loved her from *Halt and Catch Fire*.
Yeah.
And Louise for £5. I will get to your question in a second. I see it. So, but I really did like the show. I feel the same way. It was a slow burn for the start, but overall, it really, there was a point, there was a switch for me. Maybe it was like earlier on than you, Mark. It was maybe like episode 3 or 4 where I really started enjoying where the character arcs were going. And despite the jarring chronological back and forth of stuff, I became, very quickly hooked. And I had just finished just before this, and I haven't seen the last episode. Don't kill me, people, but I mean, spoilers are fine. Mark and Jennifer kind of caught me up on it. But I just remember in episode 9, I was like totally tearing up, and I'm like, I can't cry. I have to go on a podcast. But it was like I was trying so hard not to cry.
Which part made you cry? Because I cried a lot.
It was the baby scene. They had a really great use of music. Setting the mood and the tone. It was when Shivan kind of he's helping all the babies. He's helping all the mothers give birth, and it was just like it was a beautiful, beautiful moment for me. Just that whole kind of montage. But Jennifer, what did you think?
Well, I didn't have the same transition that you guys had. I don't think my experience was, even in episode 9 and even in episode 10, I fell asleep in the first 15 minutes and had to put it away and come back the next day. It was rough. It was a rough going through, but I did really cling to certain storylines. So there were so many different storylines, and some of them I liked and some of I didn't. I really loved like the little girl getting rescued by what was Jeevan, and that piece. And I love that storyline. And I love the storyline about the artist with the book and how she had the relationship with was it Arthur?
Yeah.
And then she got mad and blew up the artist studio. So when it cut to those storylines, I would be interested. Those were characters that I cared about. And I didn't care as much about the gypsy traveling
symphony.
I didn't like none. That wasn't really interesting to me. And I didn't really care about the airport as much. And it got really weird with the prophet and the kids. And I was just, I was struggling.
I thought Miranda's burning of the pool house and her art studio was a very Rourke move, to be honest with you, because she was staking a claim in art for its own sake, not art for her own pleasure and fulfillment, not just for other people to receive, right? And that was a powerful, not just emotional statement, but moral statement that she made that I thought was very compelling.
What was
very well articulated, Mark? You've said it way better than I could have. Very well articulated. You've said that so much better than I could have said it.
Well,
what was the statement that she made, that Miranda made when she stood up and she like tipped the wine glass over? We were just talking about it on our pre-show talk. Like, I don't want to live. What was it? I don't want to
live the wrong life and then die was one of the things. She said lots of things because she wrote all of that in the book. That
statement just in and of itself is a maxim that anybody can take, I think. Yeah. And that maxim could be your spiritual fuel for the rest of your life. I don't want to live the wrong life and die. How beautiful a thought is that? I mean, and this show is sort of filled with ideas and sentiments like that. I remember Yaron Brook had a show recently, and he sort of just threw away this comment. And I don't even remember the context of the comment, but the comment was something like, "You should do everything from love," right? And from hearing this from an objectivist, it doesn't have the same. It has a different punch than when you hear it from pop culture, which has the bromide of love for everything. But Yaron's point was to the positive, right? It was to your motivation for art, for doing, for living should be for a love of life. And we shouldn't be antagonistic characters tearing down what's out there so much as building up what is good. and laying that foundation from the place of positivity, from the place of love, which this story has in spades. I mean, most post-apocalyptic stories are tales of human degradation, and within that you see little spikes of heroism, but it's mostly about the degrading place that human beings are in. And there was nothing degraded about these human beings. Their physical circumstances had changed, but their internal life had not. Their souls had not. And that was because of art. That was because the place art played in their lives as a sustaining element in their lives. One of the characters, Kirsten, the main character, is a girl, says something to the effect of, when asked why she reads so much, Jeevan gets very upset with the fact that she reads so much because he doesn't understand the value of the book in her life for staving off this apocalypse, the end of the world. Because she says something like, even if the world is ending, my world isn't, because my world is this book. And that is also another wonderful expression that any fan out there, if there's any fans out there of Supernatural watching, you understand what that means in a very concrete way. We understand it as objectivists as well. When we read Ayn Rand, or when you watch, the Winchesters fighting God and winning, you see that success, getting a value, happiness, joy, the end, the thing that you want is possible. And so even when the world is coming to an end, that very notion sustains you. And that's what you see throughout this whole thing. There's bad things that happen, but it doesn't touch their freaking souls.
Yeah, that's what's beautiful about it. And that kind of leads to the super chat question that Louise asked. Why do you think the Traveling Symphony performed Shakespeare rather than modern plays?
And Hamlet in particular. So that's what made me cry a lot. Okay, because I rehearsed Hamlet for 2 years. I did the play for about 4 months, and it was a true labor of love for me. So every word they're saying, I've worked on for years, right? It has so much meaning and impact to me. And that play is an interesting play because so many people would associate that play with deep cynicism, right, about life. But really, the play is more than any other play I know, and I'm not a bibliothèque with respect to every play on the face of the earth, but certainly that one seems to contain every possible element of the human condition there is. Every possible element of the human condition there is expressed there. So much so that you could pick areas of that play. First of all, an actor can play the parts at any stage of his life, right? You play Hamlet at one stage, Claudius in another, Polonius in another, representing 3 completely different aspects of living and 3 completely different relationships to the truth, to power, to relationships themselves. And you can take pieces of that play and use them as a maxim. What a piece of work is a man. Yeah. That whole speech in and of itself encapsulates humanity in a way that I don't think any other piece of poetry does. So it's beautiful. It's beautiful that they use it throughout the piece as a sort of anchor. And it's also beautiful that it becomes the healing salve between a mother and a son, where they express their anguish on the one hand, and deep pain and hurt and rage on the other, with each other through the art, and constructively come together instead of, they don't go to therapy separately for 20 years and then still wind up hating each other forever and blaming each other for the place that they're in. No, they resolve their conflict artistically and productively come together through the art. I don't know, man.
That's one of the reasons why they chose Shakespeare instead of modern plays, because Shakespeare, there's in the entire body of Shakespeare's works, you have every story that's ever been told, I think. And it is a timeless, it's a timeless work of art. I mean, if they were going to choose the equivalent, I think, if they were going to choose, if they were the actual traveling symphony, it would be Beethoven. Shakespeare's
Yeah,
like,
but there's a modern play that I think they could have done by Thornton Wilder called Skin of Our Teeth, which would have been, which, you know what, actually reminds me very much of this show. If anybody who hasn't read Thornton Wilder's Skin of Our Teeth, or seen it live, you're missing out on a treat. Thornton Wilder was one of those rare poets of the theater who was also an optimist, not a pessimist. So you see embodied in that play the tremendous resilience of humanity, and that's what it means, and that's what you get in this play too. This unquenchable spirit, right? This unquenchable, this incredible perseverance of the good, of the positive, of what matters. And that's another thing that got me about the show. I kept waiting for the villain. Right. And they made Tyler out like he was going to be the bad guy, and it turns out he's not. And then they tried to make Clark have to sort of be the bad guy, and it turns out he's not. So it's like nobody was the bad guy.
The pandemic was the villain.
Pandemic was a villain in a way, but here you have people whose lives reset and became better as a result, right? I think the main example of that is Jeevan, right? Who's sort of a drifter. In the book, and apparently he's
panic attacks, he's like anxiety disorder. He did like no, real like social skills, and but you see it. What I loved in the very first episode is that you see a spark of that when everybody in the movie theater, everybody in the theater is sitting doing nothing while Arthur is dying on the stage, and Jeevan is the only one who says he's having a heart attack and go do something. He's the only person that actually takes action.
Yeah. Now in the book, apparently he's a paramedic, so it makes sense that he would go up there to try to help the guy, and it makes sense that later on he would become a doctor in this community. In this version of it, it's almost a raw intuitive impulse that, and I think any rational human being would feel.
I kind of like that better, actually.
Yeah. Well, it certainly gives him farther to travel, right? Because he has no experience. His life, he is beset by all these issues that are really sort of destructive enough that he can't move from wherever he is. But he's got this ability, like the doctor he eventually meets up with says, look, as a doctor, she says something about being equipped to handle death, right? And just having because
he's seen death, right?
He's seen death, and his
brother died in front of him,
and he's got the pro-life impulse of helping other people, which I think it's so distorted in our world today because of so much moral confusion. But there's nothing paradoxical about that impulse, especially when you're a rational individualist as we are. I have that impulse with people. I don't let somebody fall on the ground and not help them up, or not be concerned about their well-being. And so many people do, because it's somebody else's responsibility. They've divorced themselves from moral agency, and so he becomes better off. He's the great example of a character whose life becomes better through after the pandemic, and everybody's life is right. And it's certainly because they focus on what matters, what's good. What's good is the love that they have between each other, and what's good is the art that they create and embody and live out.
I love that what makes the world a better place after the end of it is art. I love that's the message, at least that I got, which was this world needs art in order to maintain hope and become better. And
and not art as you suggested, like the modern crap that gets confused with rubbish, but really life-affirming, high conceptual, poetic stuff.
Thus, right? Shakespeare.
What's that?
Thus the choice of Shakespeare, because it is, it is very clear art. So Jennifer, did you like the art theme as well?
Oh, absolutely. And the other theme that kind of really came out in almost the last episode, so I don't know if you would have picked up on it, but there was this sense of sometimes these random events happens and we run into another human being, and there's this just that helping each other, like everybody just needs that one other person to get through this whatever this event is. And so there were a lot of moments where you would see these temporary pairing up of characters and how they kind of got each other through. So first it was Kiki, but then Kiki did the same thing with the younger, was her Alex, the younger kid, but she kind of adopted her. And
Yes.
then, like you've got the artist that's stuck in a hotel and she's hanging out with just her coworker that they were trying to, I don't know, they were on a sales meeting or something, and they're going through death together. And it's just kind of like, these are not people that normally would meet up together and hang out together, but they do, and they take care of each other through this hard time. There was something beautiful about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she becomes the impulse. She becomes the impulse for the captain to keep the sick people on board the plane as well, and not spread the disease any further. Which is interesting too. Is that altruism raising its ugly head in the world?
The choice to keep the patients on board.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think so at all, because there's two. It's the other choice is to let them off and they kill everybody.
Right. There's no cure for that. There's no
pro-life thing about that. There's no pro-value. What value are they going to be seeking if they just let everybody else off the plane just so that other people can die? And what I think it's a pro-life value to make that choice. They're choosing. They know that they're dead. They know that without beyond a reasonable doubt. They know that they're dead, and they are choosing to let life go on.
Correct. Yeah. So that's not altruistic, and I think people have to know that distinction. Where altruism is sacrifice for the sake of sacrifice. It's not life is not considered the end or the goal. Sacrifice itself is considered the end or the goal. So these people laying down their lives so that others could live reflected a reality, the reality that there was no hope for them. There was nowhere for them to go, really. And there was no cure for this thing. It was swift, immediate, brutal, relentless, and there was no getting away from it. So it would have been altruistic and nihilistic if they did get off the plane. Because if you talk about the definition of sacrifice, at least in objectivist terms, giving up that which you value more for something you value less, right? That's a true sacrifice. So these people value life more than they valued being able to have another 2 days of living. They valued like the concept of life going on. So I thought that was, and I like that you brought that up, Mark, because that is a really important distinction to make, that this whole concept of like selflessness, to me is it's a false word, because it really comes down to what you value. And everybody in this story values very deeply, or learns to value very deeply. There is no sense of sacrifice, even when people are passionately engaged in saving the life or protecting the life of somebody else. It's all about living, which is I think that's unusual for a post-apocalyptic story. There's no cynicism in this story. There's nothing cynical about it. The
story was written, I think, in like 2014. So
unbelievable.
And as a prophetic tidbit on this was that when they were filming Station 11, the pandemic hadn't happened yet, our pandemic. And then our pandemic hit. They had to stop filming. They had to go through the pandemic. And the reason why Station 11 didn't drop until as late as it did was they were like, holy crap, we have to go back and change a bunch of stuff because we've just experienced a real pandemic. And that's when and I'm pretty sure when they're all wearing the N95 masks, that like there were things that they learned, and then like the distancing, that was all stuff that as a result of the COVID pandemic, which
wow,
very weird and synchronistic.
And then they said, oh, the pandemic was happening in 2020 also. I was like, well, that's interesting. Did you notice?
Oh, I missed it. When was that?
It was in there. It was
yeah, that was through the timeline. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I mean, a necessary thing to see, especially today, when I think everything that animated the policy of states and countries around the world was not a pro-life policy at all. It was sacrificial policy, and everybody pulled sacrifice ethics out of their asses to justify why healthy people should be locked down, why economies should be ground to a halt, and it was a sick, dark version of this, with a much less of a kill rate than this had.
So we have a couple more super chats. Allie for $5, thank you, asks, what do y'all think about the Capitalism wiki page on the Nintendo Switch the kid version of Tyler was holding? The museum was funny to me as a gamer. But yeah, so what about that Capitalism wiki thing? That kind of like blew past me, and I didn't
notice any of that. Yeah, you'll have to explain more what that is, Allie, because I didn't see any of that.
And I'm looking, and so yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I did see it. I didn't know what kind of a statement they were meaning to make from it.
What did you see? Because refresh my memory.
So he's holding young Tyler is holding the Nintendo, and he's downloaded like all of Wikipedia. But there's a shot on the actual this particular Wikipedia page, and it's a Wikipedia of capitalism. And this is when before young Tyler goes out and sets fire to the plane.
I wonder if it was ironic. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to say what that was.
The mom says something.
It's
to him.
The mom says something.
Whoever he's sitting next to, maybe it was Clark, says something about it, kind of contrary to what the boy almost seems like a little growing hipster who's going to be a Wall Street activist or something, but I forgot what the adult sitting next to him said. I don't know, maybe Ellie can remind us.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look. But then Ellie for Australian $5 asked, so much of the action was off camera to be imagined and very effective, in my opinion. How do you think they made that work? The action off camera.
I mean, they've go ahead.
I don't know if they did make it work completely. I think that's one of the reasons why it was harder to get on board earlier with the series. And you stay for the characters. So I don't know if it actually did work as much, but what do you guys think?
What action?
Jennifer's all what action?
I don't see it. It didn't happen. Am I supposed to imagine it? I don't know.
I'm supposed to imagine it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure what she means by action off screen. I mean, I think the focus was not so much on that as it would be in most apocalyptic films, and it was on the lives of these people and the development of their souls, and they're reconciling with their past, right? So we don't see her fight the red bandanas that much. Right when she's surrounded by 5 of them, we just see her start to attack one, and then we go into her dream world, which I think is interesting. It's, I mean, in the old days, they didn't, show explicit violence or action necessarily, and you still got the idea of what happened.
You do, but I think the stakes are muted a little bit because you're having to. they seem like they might be dramatically overreacting to something because you aren't seeing it yourself. So you do have to use a little bit more of your imagination. I guess you have to go back to the days of like plays when everything was happening off stage and everybody was reacting to it. It's like,
well, then they'd catch you up. They'd catch you up on the action in the play, though. You know, they come on and say, "Well, so and so was just doing this, and I think I'm going to play with it."
Yeah.
So Ellie actually, Ellie and Allie have kind of clarified the capitalism thing. So Ellie, just in the regular chat, said, well, I'll say what Allie said first, and then I'll say what Ellie said. Allie for $10 said, I think the capitalism thing was more towards that humanity would just reinvent it. Something like that, the adult, I think that was Clark, who said, reinvent capitalism, then the quarantine happened for the mother and Tyler. But then Ellie said, actually quoted, I could just delete this. So maybe Tyler is the one that's saying, I could just delete this, read the capitalism page. Oh, then Elizabeth says, we just reinvented again.
Yeah.
I don't know what that, are they saying?
It's a little cynical towards capitalism. But it's a little,
yeah.
You can't.
Well, I mean, as I say in my reality check that is going to come out on capitalism, capitalism, the name itself was given to it by its enemy, its prime enemy, Karl Marx. So there's no reason it can't be reinvented and called innovism or liberty, or or something that has the ring of shared values and freedom and what it actually represents. As it's not just the accumulation of capital that makes it, as socialism gives the sense of a community sort of intertwined and acting as Marx would say, at their highest human potential, which is to be social beings, whereas capitalism is allowing people to free and acting as their highest potential as sovereign beings. And I think, you could reinvent capitalism so that it reflects that in people's minds every time they say it, as opposed to what the Marxist version of it is what everybody thinks.
Do you want to rename your American Capitalist Party now, Mark?
Had I done that much thinking about it at the time that I see, here's the thing. At the time that I helped develop that party, I was thinking of capitalism in the same way that Rand was thinking of selfishness. So rather than reinventing a word for reasoned self-interest or rational egoism, in place of selfishness, she just said, this is what selfishness really is. Yeah, trying to be provocative. So I'm taking something everybody thinks is a negative and showing them why it's not. I thought I'd make more people question, think, and stimulate them a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I think there's this great economist and historian by the name of Deirdre McCloskey. If anybody wants to read her stuff, she wrote something called The Bourgeois Deal, which is very good, and Leave Me Alone and I'll Make You Rich. Books like that are really great, where she doesn't really call capitalism, she calls it innovism. And I've stolen that term from her because
the Innovist Party, I could see the Innovist Party.
The Innovist Party, right? Or I mean, it's true liberalism, right? I mean, she's able to pinpoint through historical example what the bourgeois deal really meant. What the bourgeois values were that Marx rejects, that actually made our civilization free and innovative. And it boils down to political liberalism, right? Leaving people alone and just letting them be sovereign beings, not in the libertarian sense, but in the reasoned self-interest sense, not separating liberty from reason, right, from its rational roots. Which I've been having arguments with anarchists. This particular anarchist, I read his book, just finished it today. I've been fighting with him all about what liberty means. Man, these guys are very confused.
Who's that?
Huh?
Which one? Which anarchist?
He's not famous yet. He's not like a David Kokesh or any of the guys.
The other one that you're on debated,
Michael Malice. It's not Michael Malice. He's not on that level, but he believes the same things Michael Malice does.
I was just going to ask, is he that level of anarchist?
Oh, he's Murray Rothbard level of anarchist, right? So if anybody reads Murray Rothbard, I encourage everybody to read the Libertarian Manifesto. You'll see some absolutely insane shit in there, like absolutely insane.
Okay.
Like for example, parents are not obligated by natural law to feed their children. And this guy makes this very same point. He steals it straight from Rothbard. Or if you are legally insane, if a judge is in a psychiatric court, which they have at Bellevue, go to the basement of Bellevue, there's a psychiatric court there where people who know what they're doing can adjudicate whether or not you are insane. So if you are judged to be insane, nobody can commit you against your will. And if you're prosecuted for a crime, as even to the extent of a murder, nobody can incarcerate you. Nobody can use force against you, because your rights are these inviolable, innate things that exist in and of themselves. And so even though you violated somebody else's rights, they're not contingent upon that. And I've tried to talk to this guy that, no, your rights are represented in the trial by jury and the due process. That's where your rights are represented. But there is a reciprocal nature of rights, and rights aren't innate. It's not like my skin color. It's not like my eye color. It's not my DNA. They're moral principles that we discover, right? And that we say are good because they reflect reality, that they reflect truly innate things like our rational faculty and our volition and our relationship to property, all that stuff. And these libertarians are really dangerous, man. They're dangerous to liberty, because they're the other side. I wrote a paper in OAC that's about it. Like libertarianism is really libertinism. It's just about baby wants what he wants, and you can't stop me. This guy even went as far as to say, if somebody wrote a contract with you that you could have a piece of property, like a Ferrari was what he used, under explicit conditions, and you signed that, once title was signed over to you, you could void the contract, because otherwise that would mean you don't have sole ownership of something. That's how crazy this is. That's how crazy these people are.
Speaking of civilization falling apart.
Sorry about that.
No. That's good. Another really, really interesting question from Louise for £10 is back to why did, in Station 11, why did civilization fall apart the way that it did? Books and infrastructure were still there. Even if most experts died, where were the entrepreneurs and innovators in the 20 years after the pandemic? Like, what happened to Bezos and Musk? And
that's a really good point. And that was one of my little sticking points with this show was it wasn't realistic that just people would just stop being the people that they were. The people that did survive just forgot all of a sudden what the world was like the day before the pandemic hit.
Well, maybe those people existed, but they weren't a part of our story. You know, we existed in a couple of communities. We followed, 4 or 5 storylines. Can't follow everybody, but I'm sure those folks probably existed in some pocket of the world somewhere. And the capacity to reconnect with the other scattered folks in the world would take a very, very long time, a lot longer than 20 years, that's for sure.
But it's an interesting question if you kind of look at, all right, what if Elon Musk, one of my other favorite lesser known innovators that I really love is Burt Rutan. He designed the first private spaceship that went into atmosphere and came back, and like the SpaceX prize, and just a renowned inventor of spacecraft and airplanes. But like, what if like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Burt Rutan, and let's say Ayn Rand, survived the pandemic, survived this particular pandemic, would the world look differently? Would the world look different than how we see it in Station 11?
I mean, I suppose it would. Each of those communities around each of those ideas, the ideas that those men and women represent, would be very different. there's a world of difference between a Jeff Bezos and Ayn Rand. You know,
Yeah.
when we're talking about concepts, ideas, ethics, and a guy like that, just because he's a great inventor or systematizer, as Bezos is, doesn't mean that he has the capacity to regenerate civilization. His ideas are simply pedestrian in that respect. Rand could certainly do, I think, a great deal of good. You know, you need a mind like that guiding people, I think, teaching people how to think and create and work on their own, giving them some sense of, you know, what is a real ideal and what isn't, and how do you measure that kind of thing. The philosopher wins, basically, at the end of the day. The businessman, you know, he could be hit or miss.
So Allie, for $5, thanks. Allie asked, what do you think of the girl, it's Kate, who couldn't understand the cell phone? She was the girl that's been hanging out with Kirsten the whole, yeah. So Kate not understanding.
No, that's Alex. That's Alex, isn't it?
Oh, is it Alex? Sorry, my bad.
Yeah. She's the one who plays Hamlet once. The rewritten version of Hamlet.
Yeah, so the question is, what do we think of her? So she is an example of well, you know what she reminded me of was in the Matrix, the only Matrix that exists in my head. There's only one. But of the people that were born after the sky was scorched, right? And they've never known a world before the Matrix.
That's the Matrix?
That's the Matrix, yeah. And they never knew.
That sounds like the Book of Eli to me.
They never knew. So it was God, what was his name? Tank?
Yeah, Tank.
Tank.
I remember him. Yeah, the computer guy.
I think Tank was, and he was like, and because he had no hooks, like holes in his spine or in his head. He was born free in like what the hell was the place where they all it was like the biblical place where they all go.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I can't remember, but he was born free and clear of what the world was like before. And that's who Alex reminds me of. Is she has no pre-pandemic memory, right? She's an example of what, and she's interesting. She's a little bit gullible. She's very, a little too.
I prefer innocent.
In it, yeah. I mean, she's a an innocent soul, and but I don't know what statement the writers of the show is trying to make about that, but I think it's a realistic depiction of how somebody who just has not experienced that, I don't know, it's almost like like my kid doesn't know, or kids that were born post 9/11, like just don't understand what that was like for the world to go through it.
I thought she was aptly impressed by the type of technology that we all take for granted today, and I think for her it was on the border of miraculous, and it was beautiful to see somebody so innocently awed by a creation of human beings. Like all of this stuff this little thing could do is, something that we saw in Star Trek in the 60s that we didn't necessarily think was possible, but it was possible. And I think she's a very independent souled person, right? She strikes out on her own eventually and goes with Tyler and the new generation of folks that are going to spring up. And in there somewhere is an Elon Musk, in there somewhere is a Jeff Bezos or an Ayn Rand that's going to bring a lot of elements together that people need to go on.
So one of the things that I haven't really thought about it as much as I'd like to, but is what, like the love relationships, the romantic relationships between people seem in the post-apocalyptic world. Mackenzie Davis, seems to kind of be with like a couple other people and you see her like going to bed and waking up with kind of a different person, not like sleeping around, but they just seem to have a different concept of romantic, non-monogamous relationships. And you think that was this part of like the culture of the traveling symphony, or was there some messaging of,
I think
this is
I think
what
I think actors are polyamorous. I think in general that's just sort of the artist's thing, right? They're not really hemmed in by rules, traditions. Let's just say, I can't say rules. I think really thoughtful people are hemmed in by rules, but just not traditions. They don't take monogamy as a value in and of itself, unless they've processed it and thought about it for a while. And so she's at that phase of her life where, that is it polyamory. I think that lifestyle is perfectly appropriate to
So
her.
do you think that was more the message of like the actor's life versus the message of here's what romance looks like in a post-apocalyptic world?
I don't know. I don't know if they were trying to say anything like that. I mean, certainly Arthur Leander was a mess that way, right? He was an actor. Fame got to his head, and it corrupted him and made him incapable of having a decent relationship with somebody, even with the woman of the love of his life, who was Miranda, for real. I mean, she was the real artist of the two of them. He gave it up. He sort of gave up his art in a way for fame, and corrupted himself in a way. I don't think he saw it as, I don't want to say it this way. So I was going to say, I saw it as a commodity to trade, which isn't bad, but he just saw it differently than the real artist Miranda saw art, which was for its own sake, for her own fulfillment and joy. And I think that corrupted him. So I don't know if the juxtaposition of his corrupt relationships, which you don't see him having the affairs, you just hear about it. Whether that and the innocence of Kirsten with various people, where it just seems like as natural as, walking.
Yeah, I didn't feel like it was a negative. It did feel kind of like, this is natural to them. They're, but Ellie for Australian $10. We're getting a lot of super chats. I guess you guys missed us. It's Zion. Thank you, Ellie. That's Zion is where the people in Matrix, where they go.
That's right, Zion. That makes sense. Zion. Ooh, I wonder what pro-Palestinian folks think of that.
So Ellie for Australian 10 asked, Miranda's logistics job seems symbolic, the best, quote unquote, the best path, especially in light of the ending and what that book did. Thoughts on that? Miranda's job of logistics.
Yeah, I'd like to know what she means by that, because
the best path. So, I mean, there's some sort of parallel with the world that she doesn't want to live the wrong life and die.
Well, I mean, she created 5 books that happened to go out to all the right people at the right time and the right place. So, I mean, logistics is about integrating, right, a number of disparate features and bringing them together and organizing them, unless I misunderstand what that is, and being able to deliver, right, being able to bring together things in such a way as to deliver something. So yeah, maybe that was if I'm incorrect, Ellie, you can tell me, but maybe that is an interesting sort of symbolism with respect to her place in the world, since she's sort of the glue that holds it all together, even more than Arthur Leander in a way, right? She's the one. It's her art that brings these worlds together. It's she that initiates that saves the community in the airport. So yeah, I think she's sort of a source of all this. She integrates all this stuff. She's the source of integration.
Yeah, no, I don't have more. I think I don't have more to say. What I love is that it is Miranda that's the glue that's holding everybody. The real artist, the true artist, is the glue that's holding everybody together. Ali for $5 is asking, what do you think of the T symbol shown everywhere, not just on the body infected? So the letter T, not just on the body infected. It was on the airport consoles and on sticks. It was mostly symbolic.
Is it in the graphic novel as well?
I do not know. I don't know. So I don't have an opinion on it. What were you saying, Jennifer?
Didn't notice it.
Yeah, she has it tattooed on her wrists, and when Tyler first meets her and asks her what those mean, she says it's for the number of people I've killed. Which, after what she does to Tyler, doesn't sound like it's so far off the mark.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it was, I feel like it was in the book, but I could be wrong. So I can't speak intelligently on it.
I don't know what the symbolism is.
So we are coming up on the at the end of the hour. There was an earlier super chat, Mark, that for you that's off topic, but so I just want to make sure that I get to it, from Al Meyer for $1.99, $2. Mark, ever considered doing night of January the 16th?
I don't know. It's probably not. Only because I think some of her language is dated in the way that Clifford Odets's language is dated. Like it has a melodrama to it that doesn't necessarily fly with audiences today. It's been a long time since I've read that play. Maybe I would, but I doubt I would. I'd prefer to do something like Enemy of the People by Ibsen, because I think it's totally relevant today and will always be relevant. Yeah, so I don't think I would do January 16th.
All right, Al, you got your answer. So where do we go from here?
Okay, so as we're coming up to the top of the hour, folks, it's important that you guys know what's going on with the strike. And I mean, these ladies have mostly, taking over the power moves and doing all the legwork with respect to promoting this thing. So I know you guys have something going on. So tell us what it is.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Do it. Do it, Jax.
Huh?
You do it, Jax.
Oh man, I've been talking this whole time. All right, fine. So what are we talking about? What are we saying? Are we?
So I mean, okay. So you guys have been in negotiations with this particular guy, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Who's starting a studio or a media corporation of his own?
Starting a new production studio that is very new technology based. And he was one of our early TV Talk listeners and got in touch with us. And we have had a really great working relationship with him for the last, year, Jennifer? More than, I don't know if it's,
and we should tell people they're seeking this independent route, like an entirely independent studio, because there is some hostility and misperception with respect to Ayn Rand and her philosophy out there in Hollywood. And so it looks like this thing has to be produced independently. So what is he doing for you in May? Where are you guys going?
Oh, yes. So there is this little thing called the Cannes Film Festival. I don't know if people have heard of it. When I told my daughter, I told 3 people about it, and they're like, "Where's Cannes? What's Cannes?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" So yes, they are sending us over to Cannes, France for the film festival, where we get to talk about the strike. We get to talk about the new studio. We get to network. It's we may get to wear a gown or two, but we will be basically working our butts off to network with people, because even though the production of the strike really lends itself better to independent production, the goal is to get enough people behind it and enough A-listers, creatives and producers and directors who actually kind of secretly do want to do it behind it, where it sort of just becomes this juggernaut that Hollywood can't stop. So yeah, in May we get out there, and we think we might try and do a TV talk from Cannes, because Mark's going to be in Paris at the same time, so we'll all be in the same time zone and closer to UK time zone, right? So did I miss anything, Jennifer?
No, we're particularly looking for co-producers, distributors, and any more investors. But there is an opportunity for independent investing directly into this particular project that the studio would be doing. So yeah, should be fun.
That's great to hear. That's great news. It'll be fun, I'm sure. I'll be just north of you, so I'll be cheering you guys on. And I guess that's going to be it for today's show. You'll be listening to us with respect to Station 11. I recommend it. I think you should all see it and see if you have a different point of view than us, and tell me about it on social media.
We're not having, I'm sorry to say that we're not having a clubhouse today. Each of us, as you can see in my background, I'm at my daughter's volleyball tournament, and I have to go to her games. But we all of us have lots of stuff that we have to get to. Thank you, Louise, for £5. This is awesome news. Yay, that's awesome news. But this was
next show.
Yep.
Yeah. So the next show. So talk about that. When is that going to be?
So that's a good question. But the next show is Ozark, because the rest of the episodes should be released today sometime on Netflix. Yeah,
Netflix. Yeah.
And so we want to watch all the rest of them, so we have a complete show to talk about. And when that TV talk is going to happen, maybe in Cannes. Is it Cannes or Cannes? I hear
technically it's Cannes.
I say Cannes. You say
Yeah,
Cannes. Let's call the whole thing
potato.
So yeah. So it's either this Friday or next Friday, I imagine, right?
Yeah, it's either it depends on how quickly we can get through episodes. So we have to figure out how many episodes. Allie is just on top of it. Allie, tell me how many episodes there are in, because you said they came out at 3 a.m. Eastern, so they're out already, but we have no idea how many there.
It's time for us to get on that.
How many of them there are? If it's like 4, we can get through that, and we can easily do it this coming Friday. But if it's like 7 or 8, it might be 7, Allie. 7 episodes.
So it might be 13, but we'll see.
Very good. All right, guys. Well, it was great seeing you again. We're starting season 2 of TV Talk. Next time you see us will probably be in 2 weeks, where we'll talk about Ozark. Until then, always check your premises. Peace.
Bye, everybody.